Welcome to Insight Builder channel, large language model automators, Python experts, and my dear friends. Configuring feedback data set with metadata and vector setting using real world data. We will be using GretelAI's Text2SQL dataset that has been recently released, and this dataset contains around 100k text to SQL data points. So there will be SQL prompt and also SQL query inside this dataset. So we'll be looking at it in a couple of minutes. What we'll be doing is we'll be reviewing this Text2SQL dataset by downloading it using the load dataset function inside the HuggingFace. We'll be reviewing the fields and metadata parts and the vector parts step by step. I will go through this process step by step. We'll be configuring the feedback dataset with only fields. So we'll be doing three aspects of work here. Once in one step, first step, we will just configure the feedback datasets with the fields, and we will select only the fields that we want to push to the Argilla server, and we will see how the UI looks. We will be configuring we'll be using a basic TextQuestion for all the feedback datasets in this particular exercise. If you want, you can actually use other questions also. After you are going to push the record, you can actually push the record to HuggingFace Hub also. You can push the record to Argilla Server. After you have done the activity in the Argilla Server, you can push the datasets to the HuggingFace Hub. We'll be doing that also. And then we'll see how to use it and how to pull the dataset that we push to the HuggingFace Hub and use it for training. So all these steps we will see. Next, we will move to the next step where we configure the metadata setting. I'll be discussing the possible mistakes that you can come across and how to recover from those things. I'll be telling you the logic why such issues actually occur, and similarly we will be working on configuring the vector settings also. And then we will be working with two different ways of getting the vector embedding into the feedback dataset as well as into the UI after we push the records to the Argilla server. So all these things, once we create the vectors and once we create the metadata, once we push it to the HuggingFace Hub, how the data looks is what we are going to first of all see. So this is the final data set that I have pushed to HuggingFace Hub after doing the processing inside Argilla. And you can see that the SQL complexity, the task, the SQL prompt, the SQL context, and the SQL query. This is the actual query that will be the target. And then we will have the suggestions, we will have these metadata. All this metadata actually comes from the Argilla. That's how this actually gets formed. So the metadata for the domain, this is again coming from Argilla. The metadata for SQL text is also coming from Argilla. So again, the vectors, these vectors are also coming from Argilla server only. So all these things will get pushed into the HuggingFace Hub. And also if you go to the files and versions inside HuggingFace Hub, you will see there is a argilla.yaml file. This YAML file will contain the fields that we are going to push, and it will also contain the metadata properties, and it will also contain the questions that we gave, the vector settings that we provided. All these things will be present inside this dataset as it has been pushed from the Argilla settings. We'll be using this Argilla test server, which I have hosted on HuggingFace Hub Spaces. So as you can see, Argilla works very closely with HuggingFace Hub Spaces, and it has a very streamlined integration with HuggingFace Hub. Fine. So I have provided you the basics, and we are right now going to dive into the code and start reviewing the GretelAI's text-to-text SQL. The data that we will be using, the notebook that we'll be using today is called as metadata. Just a second. It's called as metadata vectors T2S. So basically, it's text-to-SQL is what I have reduced it to T2S, and we begin by creating the necessary connectivity from the Jupyter notebook to the Argilla server. So that's what these two cells are doing. By using the init function in Argilla, I'm connecting to the server. I am also giving the HuggingFace key so that I can connect to the private server. Okay, So that next the workspace will be HuggingFace HF That's something that I'm going to enable. And if you are going to start a new server, then you need to create this workspace. I had deleted this workspace in the earlier video, so I had to create it again. Now, a huge thanks to Gretel team for releasing the Text2SQL synthetic dataset, and you can visit this particular link, synthetic Text2SQL dataset. This is actual dataset that is released by the GretelAI team, and you can see that it has got a lot of information here. We'll be reviewing the details step by step. The train dataset is around 100k rows, while the test is 5.85k rows. You can actually train a large language model using the data points that we have got, and we will see how to work on those things also in the later videos. In this video, we will be primarily working on only using this dataset, pushing it to Argilla and doing some annotation there. That's going to be what we will be concentrating. Fine, let's proceed further. I'm going to load the dataset, and I'm going to pull the dataset from GretelAI's repository. I'm going to execute this. It's already done. Most of the cells I've already executed. What I'm right now going to do is, after we do this, we are going to look at the various fields or columns inside the dataset. So in order to get the columns, there are two ways. You can actually look at the configuration of the HuggingFace dataset. You can see that it has got all this column names, right? And it is having a lot of information, correct? Now it is going to be our decision to decide which is going to be a metadata and which is going to be a field. So how are we going to do that? It's very simple. We are going to print one of the data point. So we will execute this, and you will see that this is a very colorful print, right? So this is happening because I have imported rich modules print function. So that's why you are getting this colorful printout, and you can see immediately that, let me zoom in a bit so that you can see it more clearly, that this is a dictionary containing the ID, the domain description, SQL complexity description, task type description, prompt, context, SQL. So this is where the actual SQL is, and this is where the SQL prompt is, right? And there is a context also that has been provided just to give an example, and we have the SQL explanation at the bottom. So all of these things has been provided to us by the synthetic dataset that has been given by the GretelAI. What we are going to do next is, we need to decide out of all these cells, to my basic knowledge, I'm going to convert domain description, SQL complexity description, SQL task type description. All these things I want to convert it to metadata, because these things can be used for filtering, and also sometimes you can use it for sorting. Like, you can actually use the domain to filter, right? Domain can be anything. So domain can be sports, medical, it can be aviation, it can be travel. And when it comes to complexity, it can be subqueries, it can be with clauses, it can be various other kinds of SQL queries that you can have. There can be multiple task types. So all this can be a very good metadata. And in case of feedback dataset, metadata can be used for filtering. And the description, the domain description, and the complexity description, the task type description, these can also be converted to metadata. And also you can use this, and you can use this for vector similarity search also. So those things we will be configuring it one by one. But here we for sure know that SQL prompt, SQL context, SQL, the actual query, and the SQL explanation, all these things has to be fields inside the feedback dataset, because we want to look at all these things, and we want the annotators to annotate the data point. The rest of the things they actually don't need to worry about. So think about it, they don't need to worry about the domain or the complexity or the task type, whatever it is. They don't need to worry about it. They need to think whether the prompt has been answered properly by this query, and whether the explanation is good, and if they want to give any feedback, they can give the feedback. So this is what it has been decided, that we will actually move the domain description, SQL complexity, task type, everything to the metadata. and the complexity description, task type description, SQL prompt, context, and the explanation also will be moved to the fields. So this decision has to be, first of all made, and then only you will go to the next step. When we are going to the next step, in what I initially thought was that, okay, before I configure a proper feedback dataset with Argilla AI, can we pull the GretelAI synthetic text to SQL using this particular method? Okay, you cannot. So if I import feedback dataset from Argilla and I use this from HuggingFace and provide the Gretel path, that is the GretelAI's dataset, it will not work because this data repository does not have the Argilla's required configuration. So this particular cell will error out. But anyway, I kept it here so that you guys can experiment with it and see what kind of error you will get. Fine. Now that that part is out of the way, next what I am planning to do was to create the metadata. Before we actually dive into the metadata, let us close this for another 5 minutes, and let us actually dive into creating the basic text question. Okay, because metadata we are going to discuss later, so I'm not going to work on discuss that currently. So let us come to that later. Here we are creating the text question. The text question is having a name as SQL text, and we are going to check the output of the SQL query. You can actually change it if you want, SQL query, SQL explanation, whatever point you want to add, you can add it here, because that's going to be reflecting to the annotator. And also you can provide the description. We can say required equal to true and use markdown equal to true. So these things we are going to execute. And next is where the fun starts. So this is where the feedback dataset is going to be assembled. So when you're going to assemble it, so as of now, when you're going to assemble, this is one of the places where I am going to have multiple kinds of settings, and I'm going to modify this for next couple of minutes. So stay tuned with me, and we'll be working on this particular cell quite a while. So you can see that I am having these fields: complexity description, task type description, prompt, context, SQL, and I'm also going to add one more point here. I missed it earlier, so let me add that. I had missed the SQL explanation, so let us add SQL explanation also. So this is a new field that I'm adding that I did not add in the earlier case, explanation. And I am going to remove this metadata settings. I am not going to give any kind of metadata settings right now. I'm going to leave it by default. These metadata settings, vector settings are assigned to none. So you don't need to worry about it if you don't give any values to it. And allow extra metadata, I'm providing it just to avoid any kind of surprising errors. So that is one of the reason. Now I'm going to create this data set. Let me execute this, and the data set will get created without any kind of complaint. So you can see that I'm executing the cell, and you can see the tick mark here. Next, I'm going to push it to Argilla Server. So this is the server that we are talking about. And just a second. Yeah, this is the server that we are talking about. There is no data set here. That's why you are seeing this particular home page. Let us go back and let me execute this. The moment I execute this, the configuration that we did here will get pushed to the server. And you can see the output is collapsed here. You can open it if you want, and you will find it that it has been pushed. Next, if you go here, you will see, if you refresh, that there is a data set here. And if you look at the dataset settings, I'm going to dive into the dataset configuration a bit, so that you guys can really understand what's going on here. As you can see, there is no data point as such, and you can see the settings. In the settings, you will find that there is fields. These are the fields that we have selected. There is no metadata here. You can see there is no metadata. And then comes the question. This is the question that we have given, and this is the description that we have provided. All these things were part of the question object that we created, and this is how the UI preview will look. Fine. So that's about the dataset. Next, I have actually pushed this to Argilla, right? If I have to get connectivity back to this particular dataset from the Argilla server, then I have to use this from Argilla method. Then only I'll be able to push the records, or else I will not be able to push the records. Keep that in mind. and this particular cell, you will see this a lot in the in this notebook. Ensure that you only use it when you want to delete this particular dataset from the Argilla server. So most of the time I'm deleting the dataset and I'm actually creating the same dataset just to show you guys the examples. So in this way, when you are going to work, you can exactly find out what kind of modifications the Argilla backend does when you are going to modify the configuration. So that's the idea. Fine. So I'm not going to delete it right now. I will delete it a little later. Here I am going to create a record, and in this record I need to add one more point, that is SQL explanation, or else I will get an error. So let me do that. So let me do this, and I'm going to say SQL explanation. So this name that I'm giving here, the field name or the field key that I'm giving should match with this particular spelling. So here the spelling is wrong. I need to give the exact same wrong spelling, or else it will actually throw an error. So I'm going to change that, but here it should be SQL explanation only in a proper fashion, or else it will not be able to catch the data from the T2SQL test dataset. So if you go up and if you review the actual HuggingFace T2SQL dataset inside the test, you will see that SQL explanation spelling is this one. So that's why I gave that spelling, and I am going to get this key: SQL context, SQL prompt, SQL task type, SQL complexity description, and domain description. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to make it as a metadata. Right, let us go down back here. Yeah, we were here when we went up. Now I'm going to execute this. This is going to create around 5,851 data records, and these records will be all feedback records, and these feedback records we can actually push it to the Argilla dataset right now. So in order to push it to the Argilla dataset, we need to do something called as add records. So we will see that in the next once this particular step is done. One very important point: I am not going to push all the 5,851 data points because it's going to take a lot of time. So I'll be only pushing the 15 data points or records to begin with. Rest of the things I will leave you guys to practice. So that said, let me actually show you. There is those total 5,851 data records. I'm going to only push from this list only 15 data points. That should be sufficient enough for us to see what happens inside the Argilla server. So that's the intention. So you can see that it happened immediately. Right, let us go back to the server and let us look at the dataset. Now when you look at the dataset, you will have all these things. So you will have everything will be pending. There will be 15 records, and you will have the complexity, task description, prompt, context, SQL query, and the SQL explanation. All these things are provided, finally providing you the area where you can provide the annotation. So annotator will provide the feedback in this location. Right, so this is what the actual step the annotator will do. So that's how it works, and once you submit, the record will get submitted, and you will see that there is once you go to the submitted record, you will see that one record has been submitted, and in that area you will see the update from the annotator. So that's how this works. But here you can, if you look at the sorting, you can say only inserted at and updated at. So only these two are available. If you want to have other options for filtering, for doing vector similarity search, etc., we have to do the next steps. That is where the metadata comes into picture. So let's go back, and now it's a good time that we use this particular cell. So I'm going to execute this cell. This is going to go back and it's going to remove the dataset. So now you see that it has removed the dataset. Fine, we have removed it. What we are going to do next is we are going to start creating the metadata. So in order to start creating the metadata, you should have some idea on what kind of metadata you want to create. what had happened was I had been trying to review the documentation that has been provided by Argilla, and there are two ways actually you can create the metadata. One is by actually understanding how to create it. Another is that you can use something called as test descriptives. There is a library called descriptives, and you can actually push the metadata directly using that test descriptives. There is a tutorial on that, but that's not going to be very helpful when you are going to use such real world data sets that we are working on right now. So we have to understand how the metadata property works. So that's when I realized, okay, so when I'm going to create the terms metadata property that I import from Argilla, I need to give it a name. This name should match with the name that I'm going to use it when I'm going to create the record. That is, I'll be showing you at the moment. And this is a title. This is just a placeholder. And if you're going to do some kind of a validation that this particular metadata should contain only these properties or these values, in this case, it's actually wrong. So this values that I chose here was wrong. The domain can be sports, aviation, international, technology. That is domains of that particular SQL query. So I initially thought that it should be the various metadata properties, but I was wrong. Then I realized I need to create for every metadata point, I need to create a separate metadata property. So that's how it works. So it's not we have to just use one metadata property, we have to use multiple metadata properties. So let us open up here and you will see that I have created multiple metadata properties, and I have created 4 here: SQL task type, SQL complexity, domain description, and domain. So I'm going to execute all these 4, and I'm going to use all these 4 in order to create and configure the feedback data set. So this question is going to be there. I'm not going to create it again. Now when I'm going to go down here, I am going to show, okay, I can actually show you by creating only one metadata property. Okay, that is, that is one way of actually learning how the things work. Okay, so if you're going to use only one metadata point, then you will have to work upon a different way of pushing this data to the records. So anyway, so let us do it with one data point, and then I will do it with multiple data points. I'm going to execute this. This particular feedback data set at this moment will have only one metadata. I'm going to push this to push this updated feedback data set. This is the second updated data set to the server, Argilla server. And if I am going to refresh it and go to the settings, you will see there is a metadata field. And in the metadata field, you will see that I have a domain. So that is the metadata that I pushed. Apart from that, I am actually saying extra metadata is allowed. So this is used when we are going to give extra metadata, but it's always better to clearly define the metadata. So we have got the domain metadata here, but if you go and look at the data set, it's empty right now. We have not pushed anything. So in order to push the records into this, we need to create the record in such a way that it has a correct metadata attached to it. So we are not going to use this anymore because that doesn't have the metadata. We are going to go here, and for this particular update number 2, I am going to comment out these. Okay, and the metadata is going to contain only this particular domain key, and I'm going to create the feedback record. This feedback record is going to be again 5851, and I'm going to add 15 of these records to the actual server side data set. So it's going to take a second because it's trying to work it out. Yeah, it's done, and I'm going to push the record right now. If you face any kind of error in this location, it will be mainly because the key that you have provided is wrong compared to the metadata that you created. So I am facing the error immediately here. Let us go down. You will see that something is missing here. So it's saying SQL explanation is missing. Okay, I know the reason, because if you see here, I had not actually created the SQL explanation data point here. So I need to create that. So let me execute this SQL explanation. The spelling has to be wrong because I had created the data set itself, feedback data set, with the wrong spelling. So So these kinds of details we have to you will actually get it once you start doing a lot of practice and facing a lot of errors. So without that, optimizing the code is not something that is straightforward. The code that you are seeing here did not come in a single flow. I had to do some checking, I had to do some understanding of the code, and then only this kind of a loop I was able to create. It did not happen in a single go. So ensure that the process that has been followed here has been done after some 3 to 4 hours of work, and that has been presented to you as the video. So now the record has been pushed to the server, and if you refresh the server and go in, you will see that there is a data set that has come in, and you can see there is something called as filter. So this filter was not there earlier, and if you click on this, you will see that you can filter on all this stuff. So this is actually the domain that we are talking about. So now the data set has been filtered on the domains that is there. That is it. So I am going to filter it based on the domains. That it's two data sets right now. Let me try museums. Museums is not giving anything. Yeah, 4 data sets have come in. So like this, the filter can work to reduce the number of annotation data points that you want to work with. Apart from that, everything else will be same. Nothing else would have changed. Now, instead of only working on the domain, we can actually have multiple ways to filter, multiple filtering points. So for that, we are going to again do one more update. So this time we are going to execute this delete, which is going to delete the second update of feedback dataset, and I am going to comment this out, and I'm going to uncomment this particular area. So I'm going to have 4 metadata points, right? And let me be a little more prudent this time, and let me actually change this. I've changed the field name right now, and I'm going to execute this. So this is a new data set that I've created, that is update 3, and I'm going to push this updated 3 feedback data set to the server, and I'm going to connect back to it. Right, I'm going to connect back to it, and this time when I'm going to go and create the what is that called, the records, I need to uncomment all these things, and also I need to change this because I have changed the name there. And now I'm going to create the record. Once I've created the record, again I'm going to push it. So after you do it a couple of times, once you get used to the keys, the values, the names of each of the parts of the feedback question, feedback dataset questions, you will become very fluent with Argilla's Argilla's ecosystem. So give it time. It took at least 3 to 4 trials for me to understand it fully. So they have done a lot of abstractions. So yeah, that is going to be a challenge with that. So here now the updated data set we are looking at, you can see there are 4 ways to filter. So there is domain of a prompt, there is domain explanation, and then there is complexity level. So you can see there are various complexity levels that we saw. So we can only select the subqueries, okay, or we can only select the window functions. So like this you can keep on modifying. So you can see the complexity level that's getting updated here as we keep changing these things. And you can also sort based on the prompts. You can actually sort it, and it will sort based on those things also. So here I am having a very less number of data points. It doesn't make much of an impact, but in real world, when annotators are going to work on these things, you can give them a very good user experience, and you can tell them clearly what to sort and what to not sort. Also, one of the benefits of having these kinds of filters is that when you're going to assign the data points, so there might be some 100,000 to 100,000 or 200,000 data points, and you might have some 20 annotators. So you might allocate 10% of data to different annotators, and at that time also you can use such kind of filters. So that's how the metadata works. Now you have seen how the metadata works. Next we are going to see how the vector settings works. Vector settings are required for us to make our lives easier when it comes to searching the dataset. So in order to do the vector settings, the most straightforward method is to use something called as the sentence transformer one second. The straightforward method that has been already provided by Argilla is to use SentenceTransformerExtractor. So this is a class that has been provided inside the integration, inside the client feedback integration module, and it is called as SentenceTransformerExtractor. You can give the model name of the sentence transformer here, and you can create the class STE class. Sorry, the SentenceTransformerExtractor class object. Once that class object is created, you can use this class object and you can update the existing dataset directly. So you don't need to understand what this particular class is doing. All you need to do is scroll down, and the place where we have already added the record, right? We have done all the activities here. What we are going to do is we are going to call on the STE object, that is SentenceTransformerExtractor Object. I'm going to call update records, and I'm going to update records. I'm going to update this particular dataset that I already am connected with, and then I'm going to execute this. So this will be very fast. I'm having only 15 data points. When you're going to do it on 100,000, this is going to take a lot of time. Ensure that at least you have a minimum GPU with you, or else the items that it's going to work with will be very, very minimal. As you can see here, 7 items per iteration, or 1.5 items per second. So the iterations are very, very slow. It takes a lot of time to work on the CPUs. And moreover, if your CPU is loaded, in my case, as I'm making the video, I'm running OBS. Because of this, the CPU allocation given to the notebook is actually lesser. So that's why you see lots of time it's taking. Now this has been done. Next, what I have to do is I have to update the dataset. Here I am going to update the records. So the records has been updated with the sentence transformers embedding. Right, you can actually unprint this. I mean, you can uncomment this particular cell and you can look at the collapsed output. So you will see that there will be vectors attached like this. So each task description will have a vector attached to it. So that's what we are talking about, the vector settings. Okay, so how did this vector setting happen? Why all the fields are having this? Because I have chosen fields equal to none. If I choose fields equal to none, then it will choose all the fields. So it's that's how the setting works here, right? And next I am going to execute the update dataset. So this is going to go and update the dataset directly in the server itself. So this is going to do the work for you. So if you go back after this has been done, and you will start seeing something called as FindSimilar. So previously this was not there. So if I now click on FindSimilar, you will see all these options. So you can click on these options and you can say find, and it will start finding similar let us actually reduce this. It will start trying to find similar kind of a question or prompts with respect to the current prompt. That is what it will do. It is taking time here because I am actually pushing the dataset right now. Oh, there is an error also. So let us take a look at the error which has come up, and let us see what is the issue. So it is saying the maximum number of vector setting has been reached for the dataset ID. So here the settings that whichever we gave was not sufficiently appropriate. So the first place where we will try to understand if there is any issue is to look at the UI in the dataset settings. You can see that there is a new tab called as vectors here, and you can look at the dimensions that has been provided. Here we can see that all the vectors, all the fields have been given the appropriate dimensions here. So I am not seeing any challenge here, except that one of the point is that the SQL explanation is missing here. So that could be one of the reason why this error has occurred, because in case of the fields we see there is explanation, but in case of the vectors, that explanation field is missing. This could be one of the reasons why I am getting this error when I am trying to execute this. So this is also one of the kind of a way to try to debug this stuff. So when such a issue occurs to us, it is always better to go back and start creating a data set from the scratch, vector settings from the scratch. So that's what we will see next before we push it to the hub. Let us actually go down below, and we are going to create the vector settings by ourselves. So we are going to create vector settings for two metadata points. One is the domain and another is the domain description. So that's what we are going to do. And the settings that we are going to provide is dimension equal to 384. That's what we are planning to do. Next, we are going to again create the dataset. This is the fourth update that we are going to do. We are going to give all this domains, and we are also give this vector settings that we set up right now. And I'm going to execute this. So here you can see that I have removed the SQL explanation. So if it is not there, it's okay. I'm going to specifically work on two data points here. I'm going to push this to Argilla, and I'm going to connect to this dataset back on my Python environment. There was an error because I had to delete the existing dataset, or else it's not going to work because the name is same, right? So it will not work. So I'm going to delete it. You'll see this cell a lot of places. Be careful. If you are going to run all the cells, then it will actually throw an error. Let's move forward. Here I am actually importing the sentence transformer directly using the sentence transformer library. I'm not using the sentence transformer extractor that we saw earlier. So I am manually importing it, and you can see that this is a sentence transformer class, and it's having a transformer with the max sequence length of 256 and a word embedding dimension of 384. So this is the sentence transformer class and object, and I can do the encode like this, and I will get the example vector, which is actually an ND array, and NumPy ND array, which with 384 elements. So that's what you are seeing here. And what we are going to do next is we are going to manually create the vectors. So this is what I was talking about. So now you will be in complete control that what you are actually pushing into the feedback record will be known to you, and you can control it with clarity, right? So you don't need to be really worried that something might actually blow up. And once this is having only 15 records that I've selected, I'm going to execute this right now. So this is going to be added to the Argilla server, which went through without any kind of complaint. Let us go back and let us look at the dataset right now, and you will see that there is this FindSimilar, and if you click on FindSimilar, there are two options. So if you click on domain description and find, you'll see that it is starting to filter. So let me actually reduce it to 10, and you can actually say it as domain, and it will start changing. So the idea here is that you can start using, you can actually say most or least similar to. So you can actually make it as least similar to also, and it will start changing the similarity score. So you can see the similarity score that is modifying. So you can see those things, and you can keep trying to find the data that is close to what you're looking for. So like this, right now we have seen all the options that we started to explore. So we have seen how to work with three things. So without any kind of metadata, we push the fields along with the questions, that is the text questions. Yeah, adding the text question was important because text question is going to be there in all the feedback data sets, right? In case of this last data set, we are going to have the metadata also. So I'm going to create the metadata there. Just a second, I'm going to place it here, and I'm going to update that. Configuring. So we are with this particular notebook, with this particular tutorial, you have seen through the entire process of working with the full-fledged dataset, and you have seen both doing it automatically, also using a very primitive way of working with lists and trying to update the vector embeddings, trying to update the metadata, and then pushing the records to the server. So we have seen both of these things right now. And next, the final thing that we need to see is that how to push the dataset that is inside the Argilla workspace to HuggingFace Hub. So for that, let us go back, and we have actually added the record here, right? So this is the object name. So if you scroll up, there was one place where he had told that push to HuggingFace, right? So now we can execute this. So this is the object name, and I'm going to execute this. This is going to go to this particular path, and in this case it's actually, it might error out, or since it's a repo, I think it will just get updated. It may not error out actually. And once that pushing is done, it will take a bit of a time. I think it is done, and you will see that I can re-download it, and I can check the output here itself. Also, you can go back and you can look at the actual output also. So let me do one more back. It's not working. Yeah, I'm going to search in my area. Let's go to my profile, and I'm going to search for the datasets that I have pushed recently and recently updated. Okay, so it is not coming. Yeah, here it is. So updated 1 minute ago, and you can see that there is just 15 rows. In the last time when I started this video, there was 5,000 rows, right? Now it is just 15 rows because I have actually updated it right now to 15 rows. And you can see the various kinds of metadata as well as the vectors that we pushed just now. You can see the metadata for the domain and the domain description. We also see the other data points that we started working with. So you can also see that by default the dataset card gets created. So this is happening by the abstraction that has been already provided by the Argilla team. So you can actually modify it, but the important point is that this will provide a lot of information, and if you have to do it by hand, it's going to take a lot of time. So you can see all the information that is provided here. Also, once you go back, I have actually pulled this pull the data back. So I pushed it here, I pulled the data back, and once I pull it back using this feedback dataset from HuggingFace, it's going to create the feedback dataset again. It will not be HuggingFace dataset. It will be again feedback dataset only. This is happening because of this particular. If you go up, you will see there is a YAML file that is present in this GitHub repo. Because of this, it is able to get all the information and prepare the feedback dataset again. So I believe that in this discussion you have seen quite a few ways of working with the feedback dataset, and you have also seen various ways the vectors as well as the metadata can be used for filtering and doing vector based similarity search. Also, we saw the challenges you might face when you are trying to work with abstracted methods like update records and add records. If you don't understand what's going on inside these methods, try to visualize them and try to think what individual steps these methods will be taking. If not, you can actually follow through using the F12 option in if you want to follow through, you can actually if you go up, and if you want to understand what this update dataset does, you can press F12 inside HuggingFace, inside the VS Code. It will actually take you to the exact method inside the SentenceTransformerExtractor itself, and there you can see what this will do and how it is doing. So you can look at this code and you can find out what is happening. So like that, you can try to understand why the error is occurring and how to eliminate those errors. These are the ways to dive and drill into the code, drill into the new libraries, drill into new systems, and learn about them. So I believe that you have learned a thing or two in this video. Do leave a like and update your comments if you have any questions, and I'll try to respond as soon as possible. Try working with Argilla and see how you can use it for your own AI development process of fine-tuning or developing a new model. Training a new model completely from the scratch. So these things you can try it out. So with those points, I would like to take a leave with 4 words, that is practice, 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 practice. See you guys. Have a great time.